Okay.
Okay.
Your
Well,
turn, Josh.
yes. Now we've got, well, kind of adjacent to that in some ways. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood, Sugar, Sex Magic. In the opening montage, you heard Suck My Kiss, and now you're going to hear Naked in the Rain. Okay, Matt, what are the stats on Blood Sugar Sex Magic?
Yeah, so Blood Sugar Sex Magic comes in at number 40 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 8 in 1991, number 192 of all time. It is the Red Hot Chili Peppers' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. It did make Rolling Stone's list, coming in at number 186, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers are ranked number 77 of overall artists on Best Ever Albums.
All right. We talked about their previous album from 1989, Mother's Milk, last season on season 3, bonus 23. So check that out. I believe John gave some bio in the band as well, his off-the-cuff bio, which is always good. The Red Hot Chili Peppers formed in LA in 1982. We have Anthony Kiedis on vocals, John Frusciante on guitar, Flea on bass, and Chad Smith on drums. They have 13 studio albums, and this is their 5th. Genres include funk rock, alt rock, and funk metal. Influences include Funkadelic, Bad Brain, Sly and the Family Stone, Bootsy Collins, Iggy Pop and the Stooges, Gang of Four, and the Minutemen, among others. Similar artists include Fishbone, Faith No More, Primus, Sublime, 311, Rage Against the Machine, Korn. It goes on and on. Their highest rated single is Under the Bridge, which reached number 2 on the Hot 100 in 1992. And their 2006 album, Stadium Arcadium, debuted at number 1 in May of that year. Some fun facts about this group. After their last album, their contract with EMI came to an end before recording this, and they started to look for another label. They decided that Epic would be the label they wanted to go with, and under the agreement that Epic would buy out their last album. I don't really know what that means. I guess they would get the rights to it then or something. Although a deal had been made with Epic, Mo Austin of Warner Brothers Records called Anthony Kiedis to congratulate him on the successful deal and complimented the rival record label. So then Kiedis convinced the group they should go with Warner Brothers. So they switched to Warner Brothers despite having a contract because he was so impressed with Mo Austin calling him and congratulating him. They brought in Rick Rubin as a producer for this album, who previously had the chance to produce their 87 album Uplift Mofo Party Plan, but he declined at that time due to the drug use of Hillel Slovak and Anthony Kiedis. So now he's back. The band wanted to record in an unconventional setting to enhance creativity, and Rubin suggested a mansion that Harry Houdini allegedly lived in. So they lived there for about a month, and band members differ on whether the house was haunted or not, and had differing experiences living in the mansion. Some liked it, some feel like it did enhance their creativity, some wanted to leave, things like that. I mean, there was nothing keeping them there, but some band members liked it more than others. There's a documentary made about the making of this album called Funky Monks that was filmed by Gavin Bowden, Flea's brother-in-law. It's on YouTube. I have watched about half of it, and it's really entertaining, and there's a lot of good like music stuff in it of them playing parts of songs from this album and kind of like rocking out. It's pretty good and entertaining. This album still contains heavy metal guitar riffs, but with less distortion, and Flea reduced his slapping on the bass and went back to more traditional bass lines on this album. So that's kind of a difference between the last and this one. A few of the B-sides of the singles were released. The B-side to Under the Bridge was called Sicca Mechanico, and it appeared on the Wayne's World soundtrack. And then the song Soul to Squeeze appeared on the Conehead soundtrack. I don't know what it is with these SNL movies, but they like Red Hot Chili Peppers, apparently.
I think it's Sicca Mechanico.
Okay, Sicca Mechanico. There's also a cover
I do remember that song, yeah.
to the Stooges' Search and Destroy that they did that was released as a B-side as well. All of the photography, paintings, and art direction for this album were credited to filmmaker Gus Van Sant, who is the director of Good Will Hunting and My Own Private Idaho, among other movies. With the exception of the tongue illustration on the cover, that's credited to Dutch tattoo artist Hendrikus Henk Schiffemacher. He had a relationship with them to some extent. The album is dedicated to Mike Watt of the Minutemen for being a friend and inspiration to them. The band did not expect Under the Bridge to become as popular as it did, at least compared to Give It Away, which was their first single and became very popular. The lyrics to I Could Have Lied were inspired by Kiedis's crush on Sinead O'Connor. He actually dropped off a cassette of it on her doorstep and hoped to have a relationship with her, but nothing really became of it, and they were just kind of
Who
friends.
was this to?
Sinead O'Connor.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what he said. And after
That'd be an interesting pairing.
I know, right? Well, they're kind of like
guess.
age appropriate too. I think they're not too different in age.
No, I mean, there's some things that make sense about that, but yeah.
The album was released on the same day as Nirvana's Nevermind and Tribe Called Quest's Low End Theory, which I find remarkable.
Damn.
That's a good record store
That's
day.
a good day. Yeah, no kidding.
Even better, the tour following this album started with Smashing Pumpkins opening for them and ended the year with both Pearl Jam and Nirvana opening for them. So what a tour show that would have been. I can only imagine. John Frusciante quit the band shortly after this in May 7th, 1992 in Japan while they were on tour, and he wasn't handling the fame well, and his addictions were also getting the better of him. And Dave Navarro came in as a replacement, and he did not gel long-term with them as a band. And that's what I've got. This is considered by many to be their best album. So what do you guys think about Blood Sugar Sex Magik?
You want me to take the first take on
Yeah,
this one?
go for it.
I mean, I've listened to this album many, many times over the years, and there's a lot I like about it. I'll start with my two criticisms of this album and then go into what I like about it. I think it's too long. I've always thought it's too long. I think the Chili Peppers, I don't know what it was with the 90s when everybody just decided we can make an album super long, so let's do it. I think the Chili Peppers are much better at like the 45-minute mark than they are at the hour and 15-minute mark. And so I do think after a while they lose a little bit because it bleeds. It's too much at the same time. And I would have liked it spread over and, I think not a little bit goes a long way, but there was too much of a long way here that. This is another one of these albums. I don't dislike Chad Smith as a drummer, but I hate the way the drums are mixed on this album. They're so in the front, again, mix-wise. He's playing noticeably with drum drag on this album. I think people have come around to really liking the drums on this, but I remember when this came out and talked to my drummer friends, it was not a particularly well-liked drumming album. And I think it's reversed now in terms of narrative because people like Chad Smith as a drummer. I look at it, I'm in the I don't like it side of things. I think the drumming on this album, there are moments like Breaking the Girl and stuff where the drumming is legitimately enhances the song, but for me there's too many songs where his drums are just smashing over John Frusciante's guitar or the bass or even Anthony Kiedis. Sometimes it feels like they're mixed too far back. So those are my quibbles on the album. But once you get past that, I mean, this is a monster album. To make the Chili Peppers a mainstream group, I think people might listen to that now and say, well, of course, they've been around for 25 years doing it.
Right.
But before this album, the Chili Peppers were a definitively dangerous band. I mean, when I thought of the Chili Peppers around this era, before this came out, they were one of those bands that my friends' older brothers would listen to that were definitively dangerous. And even when we listened to Mother's Milk, they were sort of like a freewheeling, loose, edgy sort of group. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to say there wasn't edge on this album, but this was the first album that took the Chili Peppers into pop star realm, right? And then, they come back with One Hot Minute. I know, once again, a very controversial album. We're not going to cover that in the 90s. Full disclosure, I really like One Hot Minute. I know there's others who don't, but I think that was the last gasp of the Chili Peppers trying to lean into the edgy part of them, mixed with a little bit of the accessibility. And then, of course, Californication comes, and you've got the full evolution of Chili Peppers as mainstream band. This one, though, you've got some of my favorites. I mean, Suck My Kiss is a incredibly wicked bass line with just an intensity. It's probably the best moment of Anthony Kiedis in his entire career, and he had a lot of good ones, but you just can't imagine anybody else outside of like a true funk singer singing that song. It also sounds a lot, though, like their hated enemies, Faith No More, another band I think does that, and they do hate each other along the way. But that's a great song. I always have loved the song "Breaking the Girl." I love. There's like a mystic element to it. I love the breakdown about 3/4 of the way through the song. I think it's fantastic. Under the Bridge and Give It Away are MTV staples. I like both of them, but I like the other two songs I mentioned before a little bit more. And there's some great deep cuts on this album. There's variety on this album. And you notice John Frusciante on this album, because this is the first album, I think, that's John Frusciante as huge piece of Chili Peppers sound, that expansive element that he gives them. Instead of them just being a funk group, there's something that John Frusciante adds. It's like they're a funk group, but with a little bit more added to it. And Chad Smith, as much as I don't like the drum sound on this too, brings almost a little bit of like a metal or a hard rock sensibility as well to go along with sort of the scat singing of Anthony Kiedis and the funk bass lines of Flea. So this is where kind of like the hard, the rock drumming, the using space and that high ringing tone of Frusciante's guitar, and then he extends out the notes as well as there, along with the two pieces of the band that have been there since the beginning. So can't say anything but a thumbs up on this. It's not a perfect album, but it's a must listen in the 90s. And just the fact that you could take the Chili Peppers and reinvent them as one of the biggest bands in the world, I just can't stress enough how much of an odd concept that is if you were living at the time to know it, to think, okay, if you're like 1990, year before this comes out, and you're like, yeah, in 2005, the Chili Peppers are going to be like a band that, has crossed over to like having universal
playing in the
appeal,
dentist's
basically.
office.
Ender no brainers for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? Like you could see a career trajectory for like Green Day, right, to have that happen, just because of elements of what they are. But the idea that or the Foo Fighters, right, any of those things, but the idea that like the Chili Peppers would be that, it's amazing. And so, thumbs up.
Yeah, this is a very important record for me personally in the history of my musical fandom, if you will. It's for a couple of reasons. It's funny we're covering this the week after we covered Metallica, because there's like a definitive mark from like where my tape collection ended and where my CD collection began. Because we're going to cover, Pearl Jam was one of but it was an earlier CD that I owned, but this one as well. And so there's kind of like, I started listening to different types of music, branching off from like the hair metal and the synth pop and stuff like that I listened to as a kid. And this was more, I was, in high school really when this started, when I bought this record. And it's funny that John said that they were a dangerous band, because I bought this album with a little bit of trepidation. I knew some of the songs from MTV, and this is a couple years later, because I really started listening to this pretty much. I think it was in the spring of '93, so it was my freshman year of high school on the track team. I remember everybody in the track team was listening to this. So it's a couple years after this comes out. So, which also speaks to the staying power that albums used to have. Like they'd be around for a couple, and they would release singles a year after the album comes out, things like that, and they would just have the staying power on MTV or on the radio or whatever. So
Yeah, their
But
last single came out in February of '93
yeah.
from this. Yeah,
Yep.
you have to ask.
Yeah. So I remember buying it kind of like, I don't know, like I like some of the songs, but there's, I knew it was a long album. Like, it's not really this like a funk kind of, and they were, I remember seeing some of their older videos or hearing some of the stuff from Uplift Mofo Party Plan or Freaky Styley and just being like, these guys are nuts. These are just crazy. Like that's just, it's too out there for me.
It's avant-garde.
Yeah, it kind of was, and they were like, but I bought this and I pretty much liked it from the get-go. So I was surprised at that, some of the deeper cuts and things like that. That was like, wow. And then it was just played all the time. My friends and I, like everybody, it was just omnipresent. And it became part of our identities. Like friends were like trying to recreate the Anthony Kiedis tattoo and stuff like that. Like this was just like everybody loved this freaking album. And I did too. I get what John says about it being long. I don't personally, I love every song on this record, and it's not too long for me. It's so embedded in my psyche now that I don't mind listening to it. I like all the songs on here, and I love the variety. There's so much energy. It really starts to kind of meld the hard rock, the metal, the funk, the rap. And it's just a great sounding record. I think Rick Rubin does a great job producing it. I see what you're saying about the drums. That doesn't bother me. I never really thought of that till you said like, oh, like the way that they are mixed up front. And yeah, you can hear them a lot, but to me, it doesn't necessarily take anything away from that. But I really think this album shines in the songs that aren't singles. Like Funky Monks is a great song. Like I really like the way that Frusciante plays the guitar there. He's picking up on the guitar strings to have this really like kind of like a harsher, very prominent type of guitar sound. I always liked I Coulda Lied. That's just a really pretty ballad that's like, not really in line with like the Chili Pepper sound, but it's nice that they can kind of bring it down other than Under the Bridge and still have a really great song. But Mellow Ship, Slinky in B Major, Righteous and the Wicked, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, love all of those. Apache Rose Peacock. It's a fun record. And I really liked listening to it this week because it brought back so many memories, but it also reminded me, damn, I really love this record. Like it's very solid, and it helped expand my musical palette as a kid, and I was like, wow, I can. It was this was the album that made me realize like I can like, music that's, a little bit was at least for me was a little bit scary at one point in time. And granted, yes, this is not Freaky Styley. This is not Uplift Mofo Party Plan. John, you're right. This is like the Chili Peppers going in more of a pop direction, but they're still holding on to a lot of elements that make them who they are, and being a relatively unique band. Although there's some elements of other bands that they share with them, but they kind of had their thing going on, and this is like really the Chili Peppers at their peak for sure for me. The other thing that I picked up on, because I remember listening to this, even though I had the lyrics because they were printed in the sleeve, I never really like read them or anything like that. It was like because Anthony Kiedis, it's hard to figure out what he's saying sometimes because he's either going so fast or he's almost doing onomatopoeias while he's singing at the same time. It's like, like all these, like, and all these noises and stuff like that. But it is very sexual. Like he has got a lot of like more
it's a Chili Peppers album, which the 80s Chili Pepper albums are purely carnal, Matt. So
I mean, and Sir Psycho Sexy it's obviously that one is like I always knew that like, wow, that was graphic, he's just really getting, but there's other things, there's plenty of other moments in these other songs where I was like, oh, that's what he said. Wow, okay, so it's just layered with all of that stuff. It's always makes me crack up.
Makes you laugh thinking about like how Sinead O'Connor would react. Let me get down and see what Anthony's saying.
Let's see what is his message, and the other thing I love about I think it's a great album title, and I think it's a great album cover. It's just it's a very distinct, very eye-catching album cover. It's just I've always been drawn to that. It's always been very just a cool, and all the artwork inside and stuff is great too. So this is a great record. It's a big favorite of mine. Big thumbs up for me. This is an important record for me, and I love it.
I love hearing your guys' backgrounds with these albums because I have no relationship with the Chili Peppers. In fact, my relationship with them is Californication and Post, and not liking them because of those songs, especially hearing Scar Tissue like 300 times on the radio over and over in Californication and those songs. And so I never really liked Chili Peppers that much. And I really liked when we talked about Mother's Milk. I was very surprised by that album. And this album is amazing. It's like the definition of a great album for me. And I had like, I'm not super familiar with it outside of the singles, and those I've heard. I mean, I've heard Under the Bridge more than any of them probably. And so the fact that all of the other songs on this album are good are like make me like them more than the singles is like what I'm looking for when we do these albums. I mean, this is kind of like it unleashed on this album with this as sexual as it is. That's kind of like, you know, the fact that they're always shirtless or naked. I feel like that coincides with what they sing about in some ways. And just the energy on this album is so palpable. I had like a visceral reaction. I was like playing like the air funk bass in this while listening to this, which I've never done before. I always play the air guitar, but I was playing the bass this time, and like I love just how the funk is incorporated with the rock, and I feel like they're just kind of at the peak of their powers on here. I really liked Anthony Kiedis' singing throughout the album. I really loved Flea's bass a whole lot. I feel like they're just so funky on this, and I really appreciate their indebtedness to like Funkadelic and Sly and the Family Stone and all those bands that we talked about, and Parliament that we talked about back in the 70s and 80s. And I just love, it just rocks so hard, and I just couldn't help but like move listening to this album the whole time. Even Emily walked in at one point, she was like, "You're really rocking out to this album." Like she can't hear me listening to it because I'm on headphones, but yeah, like every song. I love all the deep cuts, like Funky Monks. I Forgot Suck My Kiss and how good that is. I love it. It's like Rage Against the Machine almost in some ways. I like the slower songs, like I Could Have Lied, like you said. Mellowship Slinky is really funky and sounds really good on headphones. It was kind of playing instruments in both ears. Give It Away still sounds really good. That hasn't played out for me yet. Naked in the Rain, which is why I picked it. The bass goes so hard on that. I love it. Apache Rose Peacock is really great. They all have like a little part or a riff or like some movement in them that I really love. I love the Mellotron on Sir Psycho Sexy coming back and giving that like fat sound to it. The Hammond organ is on this album as well, which I saw and appreciate. But yeah, this is like what I wanted. You know, all these bands go through these evolutions where they become more mainstream, and it's just inevitable with aging and stuff. But this is like what I want from a band. Like in the same way when we talked about Jane's Addiction, like being surprised and like having this energy and edge and like fun feeling. This is like what I want the Red Hot Chili Peppers to be. And if I don't listen to any more albums, at least I have this and like Mother's Milk to appreciate. And I can see why, listening to this album, why they're like so great and why people had a reaction to them. It's just, and at this time too, there's nobody else kind of like doing this kind of fusion of funk and rock so blatantly, or at least in kind of the mainstream. So
well, there's Faith No More in fairness, and Rage Against the Machine. They both are doing elements of this. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess just doing it at this level and to this.
Well, they don't have Flea, those bands.
Right.
Well, and Rage wasn't out yet, right? They weren't really. Their first album wasn't out yet, so they're yet to come.
And just the bass is so like such a prominent voice on this album compared to so many other albums where it is put much of the part of the rhythm section and not like front and center like this is. I feel like you can hear it clearly. It's an equal part with the guitar and the singing, and I just notice it a lot more on this. I mean, probably intentionally, but it is, I mean, this is like one of the best albums we've listened to in the 90s so far for me. So big thumbs up.
Yeah, and some of the lyrics aren't even, I mean, there are some like politically, savvy messages, in songs like Power of Equality or Righteous and the Wicked. So it's not just all sex. So Kiedis does have some other things to say, but most of it's about sex.
Yeah,
I would say.
He does say them with a boner though. So, yeah.
I think John Frusciante said in the Funky Monks documentary that sometimes when he plays the guitar he gets an erection, and like that's so
Yeah. Well,
that's kind of where
is,
the band
this
is
is an
at.
album that would be full on erection album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'm responding to, I guess. But
The
yeah,
Carnage,
I
yeah.
love it.
John Frusciante's boner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge album for a
Classic.
reason. And you know, it's the thing that most people think of with the Chili Peppers. It isn't the first thing I think of, but I think it's where yours, Josh, was Californication was your
Yeah.
bridge. Certainly this is it for Matt. Mine goes a little earlier. You know, Uplift Mofo Party and stuff like that was where I heard them the first time. I'm like, what is this that I'm listening to? So that's
Yeah.
kind of where I always go back to do it. And yeah, it's almost incomprehensible to think of the band that started in 1983 and the band that they became in like 2010 when they're releasing that like, hey yo,
Yeah.
oh, no. And I'm like, oh my god, is this the same band? So no judgment, but yeah.